Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of IndieQuest, your exploration of all things indie and obscure. I am joined with my usual group of co-hosts here. We have our buddy Captain Drachma. Drachma, how you doing today, man?
I am doing fantastic. It's a nice sunny day out here in southern portion of Northwest Ohio, so it's a great day. It's a great day to talk about some indie games.
Darn right. And of course, we've got my buddy Frantic. Josh, how's the dang day treating you?
I got myself this giant energy drink, half drink now, but it's basically from a coffee shop. I'm getting kind of addicted to it's like they do like an energy mix, and then they put a bunch of like sugary flavorings into it. So I'm like super amped up right now and high on caffeine. So I'm excited to be here.
I'm struggling to understand this concoction because, for full context, for those that can't see video, he says it's from a coffee shop. It's an energy drink, but it's in like a big gulp cup. So it is. Yeah. It's just this like mutant combination of all things caffeinated, designed to like fully, at least in my case, fully just give me anxiety. That's all it would
do. Anxiety in a cup.
32 ounce of joy and happiness. Okay, that's what I think.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It's good that you're hopped up today because we have a very special episode. We are later going to be joined by the developer of the game, Archvale. Now, Drachma, tell me a little bit about this Archvale game.
All right, so Archvale was developed by IDA's Jamie Bateman, who we'll be talking to in a little bit here. It's basically like a bullet hell RPG adventure game, top-down, 16-bit pixel art style. Kind of reminds me of Terraria in some of its graphical style. It's kind of a procedurally generated map, so everybody's map is a little bit different as they walk through. So your playthrough is going to be a little bit different than everybody else, but each tile along the map is in someone else's game as well. So they are there, they're just kind of mixed up and random, right? So, but it's like I said, bullet hell. There's 3 different weapon types, but the RPG side of it is pretty neat because you can craft. You can get different crafting materials. You can craft different armor. You can craft different weapons. You can find armor and weapons throughout your journey. There's multiple little towns that have people in there to talk and different NPCs, and at least 1 or 2 of them are always saying something ridiculous and funny, right? They made me laugh a lot sometimes. So, yep. But the biggest thing, I suppose, and we can talk about this a little bit, is it's hard. It's a pretty tough boy there. So, what'd you guys think?
Oh, yeah. Drachma, bring in a hard game. I'm so surprised.
I know.
Now, Drachma's tricking you all. I know what you're thinking. Drachma brought a game. It's a roguelike. It's definitely a roguelike, but it's not. It just really looks like one until you squint and realize that the genre that this game is self-described as by the developers, and if you go on Steam and stuff, is bullet hell RPG, which is just a very unique combination of things, I think. But it very much does have sort of the feel of a roguelike, just in the way that you traverse room to room, and it's all about like individual combat arenas, and then you unlock upgrades, abilities, passives and active things that'll make you stronger. And then there's sort of like a revert to a town for some like hub style upgrades and things like that. So it will feel, if you're a fan of Drachma's recommendation, if you're the type of listener that goes back and just listens to the Gungeon episode over and over and over again, you're going to feel at home playing Archvale. Don't worry. But we have to at least give him his credit. He did not just bring a roguelike again.
Honestly, as we're sitting here talking about it, Steve recently played the Guardian Legend. It reminds me a little bit of Guardian Legend in the structure.
Wow, that is a very good comparison, actually. So yes, on our indie game podcast, if you have played the NES game, The Guardian Legend, released in 1989 in North America, you will have a perfect representation of what this is, except instead of switching from the top-down world into shoot-'em-up sections, instead, it just incorporates the shoot 'em up sections directly into the top-down world and
Yeah,
exploration.
yeah, exactly.
It's like even more of a fusion of those two genres than the Guardian Legend was.
Yep, absolutely. There's lots of temples that you can find. The temples are not procedurally generated, which I like a lot. And the bosses, there are some tough as nails bosses, but one of my favorite things about the way that the developer went about like actually making these bosses is I feel like you can learn the bosses as you're fighting them a little bit rather than just walk into the room, get killed, have to walk back, get killed. Like you can kind of maneuver around and learn the patterns as you're playing, and it's just super satisfying once you figure it out. I mean, you're gonna die, but it's super fun to figure out, get that health bar down, and you take a chug. I didn't mention that part, but you do have like an Estus flask from Dark Souls functionality thing where you can chug your health potions as you're playing. So, yeah, the boss is for me one of my favorite parts of this game.
Yeah, I'd agree with that 100%. They're all very there's a lot of spectacle to them, even if the bosses themselves aren't like, screen filling or anything. The bosses is where the game really stretches the bullet hell half of the bullet hell in its genre description, because some of those bosses will just throw some ridiculous patterns that you have to dodge and get out of the way of. And even though you'd think that there wouldn't be that much that you could do just in like a bullet hell dodging scenario, like, if I've dodged one set of bullets, I've dodged them all. The game actually does, with the bosses, do a lot to mix things up and make them unique. Some are very nimble, some are sort of switching their attack stances. There's even some bosses where you have to like manage taking down other things in the arena to expose the boss long enough to get them weak to attack. So yeah, very fun, very clever. Also, I don't even know if we mentioned it, but it is a twin stick game. You are moving with one stick and shooting with the other. So if you can imagine that plus bullet hell, you'll have a pretty good idea of what we're talking about.
Yeah, I love the art style. It's a really well done and vibrant pixel art game. Each area has its own unique visual flair and musical flair, and we actually talk a little bit about the music with the dev too. And like, to me, this is like, I like dungeon and I like bullet hell games for the most part. It's not like my favorite genre, but to me, like, this one was like a nice balance for me, because usually when you play a roguelike, you're beating your head against this boss, or hey, you just did this random room, you see this boss one time in this specific run like 8 hours ago. How did that boss work, And then this one, you're like, it's more like an RPG, because like in Dark Souls, you can go grind your guy and make him more powerful. You can put attribute points on him and stuff. Similar to this, there's a cash system with coins that you gather from the enemies. So like, you're going through and it's like, okay, this area is kind of tough. Let's go back to this easier area, maybe grind out some cash, build up my funds, and then maybe buy some better armor or upgrade my weapons. Go back and fight that area again. And then, okay, now I feel a little more powerful. So people who are kind of like lean away from roguelikes, I think this actually strikes a nice balance when it comes to like that part of the challenging aspect of the game.
Yeah, I love that about it, just because I feel like you said, it's just the accessibility in comparison to a roguelike for a lot of people. A lot of people can't get over that, like, well, I just lost all my progress. Every time I die, I lose all my progress and I have to restart. That's the nice thing about this. Like, you restart, maybe walk through a room or two, and you're right back at the boss that you just failed at. And I guess I never really thought about that, Josh, but that is an excellent point about roguelikes and roguelites in general is, now I have to go and slog through the same level that I know is probably going to kill me again 20, 30 minutes later. Like, that's not how this is. And you can get right back there in a minute, 2 minutes, and you can retry. And that's one of the best parts about this game, and I really enjoy that.
Yeah, the penalty that was technically a pun. So the penalty for death really is pretty soft. And again, we're comparing it to a roguelike because I think, from screenshots, or if you see just a quick video, or even when you start playing it, it definitely feels a bit like that, even though it's not a roguelike. Once the world is generated, it's always going to look that way. But the penalty for death is very minor. All you end up losing is, a couple rooms of your time, like we mentioned, and half your money. So, and even then, you can always, from any checkpoint that you spawn at, you can warp back to a town and deposit all your money into a bank. And really the economy is pretty well balanced around the expectation that you're going to lose half your money in certain situations. So even though it might be rough in the moment to die, it's really not nearly as punishing as some other games that you might compare it to, and you're not really losing much time or much material in doing so.
Do you guys have any other thoughts before we start talking to Jamie, and so everybody can actually get what they paid for with our podcast today?
Yeah, I have two thoughts. One, do you want to put it on the quest log? I mean, obviously, I think this is going to be a main quest game for everybody here, right? That's where I'm leaning right now.
Yeah, so coming from myself and putting basically my baby on the side quest once upon a time and Enter the Gungeon, this fits much more squarely on the main quest purely because of a lot of what Josh talked about how it's much more accessible and you don't feel like you have to do the same section over again for 30 minutes, right? That's what makes Gungeon hard in a lot of ways. And also something we didn't mention about Archvale is that there are 3 difficulties. I've never personally tried easy because, I'm a capital G gamer, but you can. Like, you could totally play easy and still have a good time with this game. I mean, it's still tough. It's still tough. It would still be a tough game for most people, even on easy. But, that also makes it much more accessible. So I totally agree with the main quest.
Yeah. I will second, or I guess I'll third that. +1 for the vote for the main quest. Yeah, I love this game. It's very good. I'm very glad, Drachma, that you came across it, that you recommended it to me. You understand me, bro. You know what I'm looking for. And so I had a ton of fun with it, and we had a really great time talking to Jamie. So we're not gonna hold you back. We're not gonna prevent you from getting into the meat and potatoes of this one. So if you are interested at all in this top-down bullet hell RPG pixel art roguelike adjacent twin stick shooter, which you should be, please enjoy our discussion with the lead developer, Jamie Bateman.
Today we are joined by Jamie Bateman, developer of Archvale. How are you doing today, Jamie?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
We just have a few general questions, how you kind of came to start enjoying video games. So what's your history with video games? Like, what type of games did you play before, or did you not have a big affiliation and there's some other reason that you kind of came into this?
Honestly, I don't remember a period of my life where I wasn't around games and stuff. I was, when I was very young, I wasn't really any good at games, so I just watched my mum and my brother play them. I've got an older brother, and I have very distinct memories of just kind of sitting and watching them play PlayStation 1 games, like a whole bunch of them. I think I properly started getting into playing them when we got a PS2. The first games that I properly got into were the Ratchet and Clank series. And that was when I started, from the age of, God, I don't know how old I would have been, but I think from the age of 8, I wanted to make games. And when I played with toys and stuff, I just imagined little heads-up displays, the little health bar in the side and all this stuff. From then, I was just imagining I was playing a game I've made. So, yeah. And then we got a PC. We got the internet when I was 12 or so, and from then on, I was playing endless Flash games. And obviously I wanted to get into making Flash games. I never managed because I couldn't understand Flash at all. But that was when I started making games, and so went from there into like playing indie games on Steam. And so I kind of fell out of playing like the bigger games after that. Like I had a PS3, that was the last major console I had, where I continued to play Ratchet and Clank, and that was about it with games, like the big ones. And I was purely just indie from then on. It was like I was obsessed with Cave Story. That was huge.
Yes.
Loved Cave Story so much.
Yep.
The first game that I played that actually got me to start making games, like actually trying, was I Want to Be the Guy. I don't know if you've heard of that or played that.
I love I Want to Be the Guy. Man.
Yeah, I played that, and I just wanted to make like the fan games, because there were all these fan games being made. So that was the first thing I started doing, was making fan games for I Want to Be the Guy. And from then on it was just playing like little indie games and stuff like that.
That's awesome. So are there out on the internet that people can find any of your I Want to Be the Fan games for people to check out?
I hope not. I'm sure if you dug deep enough you'd find them, but I think I was quite keen to delete my internet history, because obviously like when you grow up with the internet when you're like 12, you'll post a lot of rubbish all over the place, and you don't want that stuff. That's embarrassing. I distinctly remember like not that long ago, I went back on my like account on these fan game forums, and I found myself having just arguments with people with so many typos and spelling mistakes, and it was just the most embarrassing thing I've seen. So I wiped it all.
I don't blame you at all. So funny. You look back and you at the time you thought, man, I am so right on this. I am taking this person down, and then you look back and you're just like, oh mercy. Okay. That's awesome. I'm glad another I Want to Be the Guy fan is here to talk to. So
yeah.
So you went from the fan games. Like, is Archvale the first? I guess I don't want to be reductive, but like the first full major release you had, or what was sort of like your path from those fan games to eventually Archvale coming out?
Yeah, so Archvale was the first kind of big game that's fully playable that I've made. Back in the day, so I always used Game Maker. This is the software I've always used. And back when I got into it, there was this website called the Yo-Yo Games Sandbox, where basically people that made Game Maker games would share them, and you could play them. And so I used that website for a long time, and I'm fairly certain all my games are still up there, or in like an archive, because they took this down eventually. But yeah, I made some games that were literally just fan games of I Want to Be the Guy, but reskinned. I think the first ones I made were called like Hardcore Block, because I couldn't make an animated character, so it's just a square. And yeah, it was, the same thing as I Want to Be the Guy, where I just stole sprites from games and remixed them into ridiculously hard levels that were just kind of badly designed. Then I made some kind of arcade shooters, in the style of like Geometry Wars. I loved Geometry Wars on the Wii. It was the first one I played, and so I made a bunch of arcadey shooters like that. Then, when I started going to college and like learning to actually write code properly, I stopped like publishing anything officially, like or uploading it at all. And then around that time, I got into a game called Realm of the Mad God, which is it's an MMO bullet hell shooter. And so I started making fan games of that then. So basically all I was ever doing was I was stealing art from games that exist and making a little game out of them. And I started sharing it on the Realm of the Mad God subreddit. And then this guy messaged me and he was like, I could make art for you. And I was like, okay, sure, you could start making some art for me. And then for about 10 years or so, we've basically been iterating on this Realm of the Mad God fan game that turned into Archvale. So, yeah.
Wow.
That's awesome.
That is fascinating.
Yeah, no kidding. I was actually going to ask if you had any formal training to do this. So obviously you went to school for it, right?
Well, I went to school purely for programming. My university course specifically was in embedded systems development or something like that, which is writing like really low level code for hardware and like writing code that generates circuits and things. So it fairly removed from games, but I kind of never really expected to be able to do making games as a job, so I thought I'd better get an education in some like proper programming stuff, and then if I can't do games, I've always got something to fall back on.
Right.
But ended up being that Archvale has actually allowed us to just keep making games, so that's pretty sick.
Yeah.
That's
No kidding.
that's awesome to me. I love a success story like that. So like, you definitely described a couple of games there, like Geometry Wars and Realm of the Mad God, for Archvale. Like, what other games inspired Archvale, and how would you describe it? As the dev, what would you describe Archvale as for yourself?
It's very difficult. Like the thing was, if you look back, we uploaded devlogs of all of our progress making the game on YouTube. And to start with, basically, I had a serious problem of just like playing a game and loving it and thinking, this is what Archvale will be now. So at the very beginning, Archvale was going to be very much like Terraria. So we were going to have just a big randomly generated world, and you were kind of crafting things and progressing in the way you would in Terraria, where you're kind of just wondering about getting stuff and you summon bosses and things like this. Then partway through, I started getting back into playing games, and I played Hollow Knight and a couple of games like that, and Dark Souls 3 I played through. That was my first Souls-like game, and then I kind of went, actually, maybe Archvale should be this instead.
Yep.
So this is part of why Archvale took us about 4 years to make, was because we were kind of constantly iterating on what exactly it was. So yeah, I mean, there's still those elements of Terraria in there because there's still resource gathering and crafting. There's also the kind of Souls-like elements with the potion drinking, the limited health and stuff, you know, and I tried to integrate some shortcuts into the dungeons and things because I just liked how that felt in Dark Souls.
Those are sweet. I like those.
Yep.
Yeah, and then there's a lot of classic. I love the original Legend of Zelda, like the way the world works in that game. I love that. So a lot of people have said it's similar to that. It's kind of similar, but yeah, it's like an amalgamation of like Hollow Knight and Zelda and Enter the Gungeon and Nuclear Throne. It's just all these games I really like, and I just threw stuff in.
I love that.
It's funny you mention Enter the Gungeon because I actually found you through Retromation. I don't know if you know who Retromation is on YouTube. And he, like, used to watch him play Gungeon all the time, and I'm a big Gungeon fan myself. And he's like, this is like RPG Gungeon. I'm like, I am all about it. So that's awesome.
Yeah, no, well, I played Gungeon all the time, and I was like, this game is sick, but like, I really wish that it was an RPG. I wish, like, I was going through levels and they got harder and harder and harder, and it kept going. Whereas, you know, in a roguelike, you die and you're back to the easy levels again. And it's like, sometimes I just wish it kept going and getting harder. And so that was the original thing I wanted to do. It kind of turned into, in terms of gameplay, it's a bit more frantic than Gungeon, I think. There's a lot less finesse in it because the bullets kind of get spammed a bit more randomly and stuff, which wasn't, like, it was intentional. We didn't want everything to be perfectly dodgeable. There was an awful lot of complication trying to get the game to work as an RPG with a bullet hell kind of coating. Because in a bullet hell, you don't take hits very often because you've got a very small hitbox and things have to be telegraphed very clearly. The projectiles need to move slowly. So you don't want to get hit often. But the only real way I could have you progress, and so, like, yeah, there's two things. You can make the player not do enough damage to kill the enemies, or you need the enemies to kill the player quickly, which kind of meant I had to make it a bit cheap sometimes, and you had to take hits to make sure you had enough armor and stuff to survive in these harder areas. And then I've seen in the negative reviews we get, often people are like, well, there was no way I could dodge all this stuff. And it was kind of like, well, it was a sacrifice we had to make to kind of make, sometimes you can't dodge everything because we need you to take hits. You know, like in a turn-based game, you're always going to take a hit. And it had to be a compromise.
Yeah. And actually, I wouldn't even call this a criticism, but I will say that one of the first things that, like, I had to adjust my brain on is, you know, the comparisons to Zelda. There's the heart health system, but it's underlying, you know, it's RPG, it's numbers, it's better to think of it more like a health bar than like you would traditionally think of Zelda. So as I started playing, I was being a little, I think, overly cocky because in my head I'm like, oh, I'm used to Zelda, I know I'm going to take damage in increments of a quarter heart, half heart, or maybe a whole heart if it's a big attack. And then I'd be like, oh, actually I'm taking like 2 2/3 hearts worth of damage. But again, that was on me, I think. And as soon as I adjusted to it, I was like, okay, now I'm doing a lot better. Plus, it's got that classic RPG thing where I can venture too deep into an area that maybe I shouldn't be and be like, I'll just go grind somewhere else and upgrade a weapon or get new materials or something like that.
We actually bounced between having a health bar and the hearts quite a lot during development. We ended up settling on the hearts in the end because it felt more fun to get a heart container and see an extra heart up there than for just the number on the health bar to be a bit bigger. So that was literally the only reason we went with hearts instead of a plus the nostalgia factor. It looks more like Zelda, which is fun.
I will definitely say I agree with your heart choice because it's very aesthetically pleasing, especially on the screen. Like, it looks nice.
Yeah.
Like, you guys did a good job with that. So
Speaking
of like all the inner workings and how you decided armor would affect taking hits and the hearts and everything, how long did it take to develop Archvale from like, this is the thought that we had and we're going to start working on it, and then how long did it actually take to roll it out last year? So
I think, as I said, we changed the vision of Archvale a lot during development, which I don't think was a mistake. I don't know how people manage to have this thing where before they start a project, they think this is exactly what the project is, and then they do it, and it's exactly that. I don't know how you do that. That is beyond me. But Archvale was... I mean, I'm going to check, actually, because time's been such a blur. I can look at the first devlog on my YouTube channel and see when that was. It was... So the first devlog was 3 years ago. I'm pretty sure that's almost 4 years now. November 2018 was the first devlog, and I started it a couple of months before uploading that. So yeah, it's been about 4 years of iteration and tweaking things. The core content of Archvale, like most of that, was done in the final year, because whilst we kept changing things and whilst we kept working stuff out, I kept kind of improving how good I was at making the content, and so I wanted to do like a final pass of all the content again, to get it to the best that I feasibly could with the deadlines we had and stuff. So yeah, most of the content that you play through, that was done in about a year, but like the time it took to get there and work out where we wanted the game to be, that was probably 4 years.
Wow, dang. That's a long time. And how big is the team? Is it the two of you, or are there additional people on top of that?
So there's me programming and designing stuff. My artist is doing the pixel art and helping me design stuff and playing it with me. We brought on... So I had a friend work on music from the beginning. Then we brought on an extra person to do some music, and then near the end we brought on someone to do some sound effects for us, and that's the whole team. So core making the game is me and the artist, and then like sound, we've got 3 people.
Dang. Well, as a sidebar, excellent music. As I'm listening to it, not to just compare it to other things constantly, but there's songs where I'm like, oh, this is very Dragon Warrior, or this is very like the Pokemon Diamond and Pearl.
Oh yeah, the town theme and stuff like that. I know when the artist sent me that, it was like, this sounds so much like Pokemon. Exactly, Diamond and Pearl is what I said, because I played through that one on the DS, and it was immediately like nostalgic to me. It was awesome.
Yeah, really, really good. So, I mean, obviously with this game coming out essentially right around the pandemic and everything, what was the day-to-day like for you guys? Was it just all remote work, all via Discord? How'd that work?
Yeah, so the team is actually spread out kind of crazy. So I'm in the UK. The artist that I work with, Fops, is in America. The sound designer we got on board was in the UK, and then one musician was in America, the other was in Australia. So we had about the widest stretch of time zones you possibly could.
Is there even 1 hour a day where you can all meet to talk at the same time?
No, literally no. My artist and the people that did the music have literally never spoken to each other. So we never even had like a Discord where we all talked, just because it was just it was quite fragmented development. We didn't talk as a group too much. I was kind of managing stuff myself, talking to each individual person, and then everyone would just see the new stuff as it went into the project. Me and Fops barely even spoke over voice. We just sent Steam messages to each other throughout almost all of development. We probably had maybe like 2 or 3 hours worth of calls throughout the whole thing, and that was it.
Wow, that is fascinating. Good on you for being that like central hub managing all the inputs from every direction. Dang.
Yeah, no, that was not easy. I've got to be honest, because it was also speaking with our publisher and things, and yeah, there's a lot that happens around release, with certification and sending off the builds and talking with QA as well. We had a QA team work on the game with us. Yeah, it was the last year was crazy. It was mental.
I think you could put managing a remote team on your resume now.
Yes,
I imagine it would be very difficult.
For sure.
Oh, I mean, building up to like release of the game, a small game like this, you said you had a publisher. What's like the marketing like frenzy look like for something like this? How do you get it out there, like word of mouth? I know it's on Game Pass. I'm sure that was a big boost for you guys.
Yes.
But like, what is that like from your angle and your perspective?
So throughout development, I was constantly trying to do what I could on my side to market with my devlogs and like tweeting. In fact, tweeting was the reason that we even found a publisher, because I wasn't actively pitching. I never thought a publisher would be interested, but one of our tweets got a bunch of likes, and yeah, someone from Humble reached out to us.
That's incredible.
But yeah, so I kept doing my thing, and Humble did their thing. I didn't hear too much about what exactly they did. They'd come to me with material and be like, what do you think of this? And I'd say, yeah, that looks good. But yeah, they clearly worked some magic, because we got quite a lot of attention on the game. We had quite a few streamers play it. There's also the whole period where before release you get all the reviews in, and that was like terrifying to me. It was that was very stressful, because the first review I saw was not overly positive, and it kind of like I was still in the middle of working on quite a lot of stuff for the day one patch, and yeah, to get that like a week or so before release was kind of brutal. But then after I saw that review, the next one I saw was like there was a 5 out of 5 that we got from someone, and then a load of 9 out of 10s, and that was that made me feel a lot better.
Take a deep breath, like finally, okay, all the work's paying off. Yeah.
Yep.
So this is a little bit of a tangent from that, but we have some friends who are fairly, for the gaming community, fairly large YouTubers, I would say. And we've heard plenty from them about just how sometimes the comments and the negativity that they can get can really put them down if they really dig through it. I can only imagine how that would affect you after you spent 3 years like pouring your soul into this and then getting those critiques and stuff. So.
Yeah, no. To be fair, critiques generally, I don't like. I can understand how some people would dislike certain things, you know, like you can't please everyone.
Right.
But yeah, when you look at the reviews and you see fairly nasty comments, that's hard. I kind of just ignored all reviews for quite a long, like the user reviews anyway. I could usually, I think most like journalists tend to be nicer with indies anyway. Like they won't say anything too harsh. At least the ones that reviewed Archvale, even the negative ones, had plenty of more positive things to say. But yeah, if the critics never go too harsh, but the users, they do. the players themselves and can have some fairly harsh things to say.
Yeah, and so much of that user stuff, like somebody jumps in and plays it for 10 minutes and it's like, oh, I'm getting hit too much. Like, is this your kind of game? Have you ever played a game like this before? It's like, you know.
Yeah.
So. So what made you decide on procedurally generated maps, like, in just like how you actually travel through?
This was, again, kind of an artifact that was left over from us working on the game when we thought it would be more Terraria-like. Really, if I had this vision from the very beginning, the likelihood is I would have went with making the world manually. So it was more of an artifact that was left over, and it was like, this works, and it's going to take a long time for us to change it, and I don't know if it would be worth it. In the end, I quite like the procedurally generated world, especially because, you know, it means that you can't, you have to explore, and it feels a bit more rewarding knowing that if you're doing another playthrough, that any room you go into could have something in it. It made development much faster, obviously. It was much quicker to do. But yeah, we still had to go and... Because originally we were also going to procedurally generate the dungeons, and I decided, actually, I think I want to make these by hand to make sure that the kind of difficulty is a bit more consistent, and that I know that this is a challenge you have to beat, and it's always going to be this way. So that was a decision we made like midway through, that dungeons would be handmade. Yeah, I still don't 100% know how I feel about the procedurally generated world personally. Like, I think if I could do it again, I'd probably not do procedurally generated. But there's plenty of people that haven't even noticed it's procedurally generated, and I don't know how. But I've read reviews, and they're like, it's great that this guy actually went and made a world rather than procedurally generating. And it's like, well...
Sure. I'll take that compliment. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So I don't think I actually knew until I was watching Retromation play it, and I was like, "Oh, that's not what my map looks like." And then Blink just streamed it recently too. It's like, obviously that's not what my map, like, everybody's is different, which I think personally is kind of cool because everybody has a little bit of a different experience. But I think it was a solid choice to keep the dungeons the way you did, because that's a much more like, I want you to be able to overcome this challenge and beat this boss in this way, and it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I just, admittedly, because it was procedurally generated, and mostly, honestly, because Drachma was the one who recommended it to me, and he's always playing roguelites and roguelikes, I just assumed that it was going to be one, and so when it was procedurally generated, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, he's recommending me another roguelike, that makes sense, sure, and then when I die and like the world stays the same way, I was like, is this so this is not a roguelike, it's roguelike adjacent, it's a roguelike.
This was such a difficult thing for us, because we knew for a fact people were going to see there's bullets everywhere, it's pixel art, and like it's kind of closed rooms, and it's like, that is immediately roguelike. And you look at the comments on trailers and stuff, and they're like, oh, another roguelike. It's like, no, it's not, please listen. And it was like, I was trying to be very, like, when we were talking with Humble about the marketing, I was like, we really need to make sure people don't think this is a roguelike, because it straight up is not. It's not a roguelike. And we still get people saying, oh, it's an Enter the Gungeon clone, and it's like, come on, it's not even a roguelike. I mean, but yeah, it's very hard to communicate that it's not, because, well, it's an indie game. It makes it, there's a lot of indie roguelikes. And there's not many bullet hell games that aren't roguelikes, and shoot 'em ups like that. So yeah, it's very hard to get it across. And yeah, we clearly didn't manage, because I've seen people who've played the whole thing and still call it a roguelike now. And it's like, what? How do you think it's a roguelike? I don't get it.
Do you even know what that word means? Or?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it kind of tied back to the procedurally generated world and just sort of like broader design. Did you find it difficult, or did you have to implement certain systems? It really seems like you did have to gate people from certain parts of the world. Like, as I'm going through, I can tell seems like HP checks or DPS checks in certain parts to like lock you from later game areas. But did that come late in development? I'm curious, like, just generally, if that was always part of the plan, or how you manage that.
I always wanted... The thing was, we wanted to make sure that people couldn't just get absolutely anywhere whenever they wanted. But we didn't want to make it like, you have to get the key to the door to go in. And at one point, we actually had, because we felt like we were running out of time, there's a part in the game where you can either go off to the desert area, the snow area, or you can go into the cavern area, which is like the late game stuff. And there was a point at which the cavern area was just blocked by a door with 2 keys, and you had to go to the desert area and then the snow area. In the end, we dropped that, and we just put in a really hard boss that just sits there. And people get to it and say, this is the hardest boss of anything I've ever played. And it's like, well, that's because you're not meant to fight it yet. We always wanted to try and make sure that the things we put in the way of the areas could be beat in more than one way. So we had there's a door in the jungle where you have to do enough damage in a certain amount of time to destroy a thing, and then you can get in. And it's like, so yeah, you can either go through the progression normally and get, strong enough weapons to break it, or we tried to make sure that you could use a kind of special combo of badges, so you can do things like bombing yourself to increase your attack speed. You can get a badge that makes you attack faster when you get hit. And we made a bunch of badges that we hoped could let people creatively break in early. In the end, like during our final bit of testing, we accidentally kind of under-tweaked some of these values, and people broke through the locks far easier than we wanted them to, which led to some more like some people got into late game areas and then stomped the rest of the game, and then got to the final boss and were suddenly shocked that it was really hard. And it's like, well, that's because you've just steamrolled everything by accident. And I mean, that's the consequence of us trying to be clever with our locks rather than just sticking keys in the way. But I'm glad we did it that way, even if it ended up meaning some people had not exactly the experience we wanted, but it was better that way. I was glad that we could come up with, and I mean, we only came up with a couple, but yeah, I liked having those things in the way that forced you to do something creatively. I mean, you could do, yeah, and it was the same with the health check one, where you need there's a trial where you just get hit with bullets over and over again, and you have to survive it. And yeah, we undertweaked that one pretty bad, and you can kind of get in really easy. But we intended for it to be like, well, you could use those badges that give you extra hearts to get in there, or you could like use the badges that give you extra dashes to get more iframes on these things, or you just get enough heart containers. And yeah, that was what we wanted. We never wanted to do the doors with locks. We only did that as a last resort when we were running out of time. But we definitely wanted to make sure you couldn't get into places, because one thing we didn't want to do was too much grinding where you kill the same room over and over. We wanted to put the items in chests, and that meant that if you could feasibly get into an area and get to a chest, you break it open, and then you've got a really good weapon that just lets you beat the rest of the game. So something had to be there, but yeah, we didn't want it to just be a door with a lock, so we tried.
Yeah, I appreciate the gentle nudges on if you're going the right way or the redirection elsewhere. Honestly, my personal metric for if I feel like I've ventured into an area I shouldn't be yet is how long it takes me to defeat one of the like material dropping rocks.
Yeah.
If I have to stand there for like 5 seconds before I do enough damage to it, I'm like, oh, maybe I've wandered too far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You actually compared it to Dark Souls. You know, just kind of in the structure of it and things, and with the health.
Yeah.
That actually reminds me a lot of Dark Souls 1, right? Technically,
yes.
You can go to the catacombs, but it is very difficult because you are going to just get rocked. And so many people, I remember reviews, especially user reviews back in the day, where they're like, this game is awful. Like, I cannot get by these skeletons. I just keep dying. So, I mean, it's like, try a different path, dude. It's a big world. So,
Yeah.
Yep.
And I still love that whole thing. Our next game that we work on is going to have plenty more of it. So, more of those kind of loose locks that you can get through if you're skilled enough, because I just think it's so fun.
I mean, obviously, this is like a tough game, like Dark Souls comparisons, roguelike comparisons, like... Where's your line on like balancing that? Like, there's so many systems in this game, like, you know,
yes,
armor, you know, weapons, everything like that. How do you find that balance of like, this game is tough but not too tough, where you're just beating your head against it, but maybe beating your head against it just the right amount?
Yeah, so there's a massive problem when you're making a game where you become very, very good at it very quickly. And it's like, I'd make something and send it to Fops, who's the artist, and he'd play it, and it would be like, I can't do that. That's unreasonable. So I had to handicap myself during development. And with the equipment system, I would kind of try and beat the boss without any armor on, without any badges on, and see if that was feasible for me to do. And if it was, I assumed this might be in a good place for other people to play it, and then I'd send it off to some friends and see if they could manage it. So that was the main way I did it. There's some things I wish I had done more, like kind of just measuring on average how many times you get hit by a boss and trying to work out, like, is this boss hitting people too many times or not enough times, and things like that, which is something we're trying to do now with some balancing patches. I've got some debug tools that people are using that just shows you how many times you were hit during a boss fight and how many times you would have had to been hit to die. There's an awful lot there, and again, how successful we were with making some of the content hard enough is up for debate. I think some people had a very easy time with some stuff and others had a harder time. I think some of it is due to class imbalances and stuff like that. It was hard to work it out because when it came out, it was like some people were saying this boss was really easy, and others were saying that boss was really hard, like unreasonably hard. And it's like, who's right? I don't know.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, for what it's worth, I would say however I went through it, the exact combo of weapons areas, it was perfectly tuned for me because I always usually barely survived the bosses with one hit left. All that ideal design philosophy coming into play.
That's exactly what I wanted.
Yeah, I think that speaking about weapons, I think the freedom you allowed players to have is pretty incredible. Like, especially with badge combos, like you can play basically, if you can think of how you would like to play this game, there's probably a way to get there for you eventually, right? So,
yeah, there was the main issue with the classes and stuff. In the end, ended up being that melee is a bit too hard to use because obviously it's a bullet hell, and you've got to go up to the enemies to hit them with the sword. So we've got some updates coming out with new badges for melee to hopefully make it a bit easier to play melee. So yeah, that is the one thing we did have to. Magic was too good. Melee was too bad.
Yeah, we were actually talking about that like in our chat here before the show, and like if you use the melee weapon, that's automatically a hard mode for this game. I think. Like,
yes,
literally, yeah.
Yeah, you're so close. The bullets haven't had time to spread out, so I can't get away from them.
Exactly.
There are melee weapons like the flail and things, and if you can get a little bit of a range boost on some of them, they make sense. But yeah, it's tough. Like sometimes if I decided my last run I was going to do a hard mode run, which I'll be honest, hard mode is hard. Like, it's real hard. Like you take like 3-4 hits sometimes. I feel like I walk into a room and 2 seconds later my character's just evaporated on screen. So.
I watched Soda Poppin play through it on hard, and he went actually mental. It was bad. I felt guilty watching it. I had to turn it off because I was just like, I can't watch this man suffer. He was not having a good time.
And I think that's why I told these guys when they were going to play, because I started playing it on hard, and I'm like, guys, do not play on hard. I know you think you're tough, but just don't do it, because it's not that it's a bad game mode, but it's really like for somebody who is very experienced with the game, then try the hard mode. But it is like you have to be really solid at dodging. Like you cannot take hits.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, and there's a lot of ways to make the game easier or harder as you play through it too, even in the normal mode based on how you build.
Yeah.
So this is a very specific question, but I just like them so much, so I have to ask, like, where did the inspiration for the mini games where you can't shoot and you're just dodging come from? Because they remind me of a couple other games, but I'm curious if they were inspired by anything or how those came about.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what exactly the inspiration was. I mean, originally what we wanted to do was have quite a lot of different mini games that you do in these little shrines. We were a bit low on time, and it was a bit over-scoped to think of it. I had like this one prototype where it was like you were playing Pong, but the ball was also something you had to dodge, and like, so you were moving around to hit the ball with the paddles, and you were also trying to dodge the ball and stuff, and it was like I was going to try and make a couple of other games like that, but in the end I went with this because it was quicker for us to make, and I thought they were still fun. That's a very mixed opinion on whether they're fun. Some people really hate them, really passionately despise them.
Wow, no, not at all. I mean, you mentioned Geometry Wars earlier, and they're very Geometry Wars pacifist mode from Geometry Wars 2, which I can't tell you how many hours I dumped into that. I absolutely loved that game and that mode, so I was very happy to see this, because I mean, simple idea, but I think actually relatively uncommon to have that type of just like sort of simple evading game. The only examples I can think of are Geometry Wars, and then there was a more recent indie game called Hyperdot that was pretty similar too.
Okay. I think Discrim is similar as well, if you've played Discrim.
Yep.
I remember seeing Discrim after we had come up with this, and it was like, this would have been cool to see earlier, because it would have given us some more ideas for these little rooms, but it was kind of like past it at that point, because they have some really creative ideas in that game.
Yes.
But yeah, we went through a few iterations of them. Like picking up the crystals was a late addition. Before it was just a time-based thing, and we changed it so that you had to chase these crystals around and collect them to progress. We wanted to do some stuff where you had to fight against like ghost versions of the enemies as well. So like you'd fight the enemies in the biome, but you couldn't attack them. You just had to purely dodge. The main thing there was very early on in development, we got feedback from people saying, like, this looks exhausting to just be shooting and attacking and fighting all the time. And so we came up with some mechanics. If you look at the devlogs, we had like a farming system and a base building system where you could kind of collect trophies and put them in this little room, and you could grow like materials for making potions and things.
Wow.
We ended up ditching those because, you know, overscoping and just a bit unnecessary. When we had people playing the game, they weren't engaging with those systems, so we just dropped them. But I wanted something that was a bit more zen, because in the levels it's chaos. It's really quite stressful. It's a lot to deal with, and I think that most of the... I mean, it's clearly not true. I'm clearly wrong on this, but I thought they were quite a zen experience. People get so angry at them. They get so angry. So many negative reviews on Steam are just like, I hate whoever designed the little moon challenges. I hate them.
I don't understand that sentiment at all, because I feel like every time when I was going through the game originally and I found that crystal statue, after I figured out what they were, I was like, oh, like it's enough like the game that you're playing already, but enough different that it's like a fun side thing to do. Like
a little break.
Yeah, honestly, like I would describe it as one of my favorite mini games or games within a game that I've ever played. Like I think they're really fun.
Oh, that's sick.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's nice to hear after all the the criticism of them.
It's a nice pattern thing. You like learn the pattern. You're like, okay, this one's gonna do like a swirly thing. All right. Yeah. It's pretty fun to figure out.
Yeah, they ended up feeling, to me at least, more like puzzles where you're trying to work out how exactly the best way to dodge this stuff is, rather than purely just like, I need to move away from the bullets. Most of them had a kind of like, if you do it this way, it's going to be much easier for you.
Yeah.
Which I thought was quite cool, but again, people didn't like them.
I think that we're on the side we do like them here on this podcast.
That's good.
So that's good. Speaking of things people don't like, or things that you kind of like look back on and are kind of disappointed in hindsight. I know this is a negative question maybe, but or is there anything like you just wish you didn't put into the game? Like you just like, this is my baby and I didn't get to put it in there. I didn't have enough time. Anything like that you can speak on?
Honestly, it's really hard to think of stuff I wanted to put in that I didn't, because it was like there's so much in it. There's so many weapons and so many items and so many bosses and things. There were a couple of bosses I didn't have time to do, which I'd have liked to have. I wanted to have a mini boss in every zone, and I couldn't do that in the end. But, you know, it was only a couple of zones that were missing a boss. There were some bits that I regretted putting in the game at all, or I should have paid more attention to in the first place. And this is like the surrealist thing to me. I don't know what your experience was, but with the ice segment in the snow dungeon, you have to dash, and you have to time the dashes. And compared to like a rhythm game, the timing is not strict. But oh my god, there are people saying it's like the hardest thing they've ever had to do in a game. I can't understand it. I just don't know what it was that is so difficult about it. But apparently, it's really hard for some people, and other people it's nothing. It's like they don't even mention it. It's like, yeah, I enjoyed those parts, and it's like, but some people say they're so difficult, and it took them like 3 hours just sitting there bashing their head against this ice sliding segment, and it's like, what? I don't know how I messed that up, clearly.
It's funny you mentioned that, because when you were talking earlier about handcrafting the dungeons versus procedurally generation, the first thing I thought of was that ice dungeon, and I loved those puzzles, but I also was good at them, and it makes sense that you compare them to rhythm games, because I play a lot of rhythm games otherwise. So I sort of just cruised through them, and I was like, oh, that was a fun little clever little puzzle that they build in there. I like it. I wouldn't have even expected or thought that maybe folks would get stuck on that, because the timing is kind of strict.
Exactly. I just thought, like, this feels quite fun when you just like zip through it. It's quite satisfying. It's like, this is a fun little thing to add. But then no, this is the hardest part of the game for most people. Like, it's not even a small number of people. On the first day, the most the negative reviews were saying this ice segment is too hard. we had to change the ice segment. I explicitly made it significantly easier, and even now I get people saying the ice segment is too hard. And so there's definitely some stuff I think I should have done better, like just giving you a bit more time when you fall off to dash again. But it was clearly too hard.
See, that's funny that you mentioned that puzzle, and then all the dungeons have something similar.
Yes.
It's kind of like a game within a game, right? Where you can actually dash and you get to the green crystal, so you refill your dashes. Like I love those too. Like sometimes they're pretty tough, but it's another break from the action that is super fun.
They were, again, a late addition, because originally you couldn't dash over holes. And one day I was just like, you know what, I think I want to make it so that you can dash over holes. Because what we were just going to do before is just have, like, turrets that shoot bullets, and you just kind of have to time moving through them. But I couldn't really come up with much beyond just, like, you know, there's a line of projectiles, you've got a time moving through it, and sometimes it could shoot at you instead. And it was like, I couldn't come up with enough stuff. So I thought, let's do these kind of parkour segments. And yeah, they're up there with the moon challenges for the most hated parts of the game.
Kind of going back to marketing a little bit, how do you go about getting a game on Game Pass, and do you think that's helped kind of spread the word about it?
100% it's helped spread the word. There's been so many people that I cannot help myself just constantly searching for Archvale on Twitter and stuff and just seeing what people say. And the number of people that are like, I never play games like this, but I've got Game Pass, and I got this game Archvale, and I really liked it. It's like there's so many people that do it, and so many people that have just reached out to me and said, like, they played it with their son. I saw someone, like, here's my 6-year-old fighting the final boss of Archvale, and he's just, like, out with a flail, just hitting it over and over again. It's like, it's so cool. There's all these people playing it that probably wouldn't have ever played it before. In terms of getting on Game Pass, that is all Humble's doing. I wasn't even, like, they just messaged me one day, like, do you want to do this? And it's like, yeah.
The easiest yes of your life, yeah. Oh,
yes,
sure.
yeah. No, Game Pass was awesome for us. Yeah, really good.
Yeah, I'm glad that anything to spread the word, because I think it is an awesome game that deserves a lot of attention from folks. So,
thank you.
which sort of just starts to wind us down, but I'm wondering, either in terms of Archvale, you've mentioned like some balance tweaking and stuff, but for Archvale or for the studio overall, you know, what's next? New content, new game on the horizon? What's
both, but there's both. So we're working on, since everyone calls it a roguelike already, we figured we may as well make a roguelike mode for the game. So we're making an actual roguelike mode that will go into Archvale. Some new badges and things like that are coming. At the same time, we're working on a new game, which is another bullet hell adventure game, because I've been making bullet hell games for 10 years, and I decided I don't want to stop. And it's kind of trying to learn from the lessons of Archvale, so this time making the world by hand entirely, and kind of removing some of the elements that made making content harder, and trying to get a more consistent challenge in the game. Again, this might change, because we're very iterative and we always change what we're doing, but right now I'm pretty sure that's the plan. So yeah, more Archvale stuff is coming, and yeah, a new bullet hell adventure game is coming as well, hopefully. So yeah, fun stuff.
Yeah, exciting. Sign me up, I'll be there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So thank you so much for stopping by the way. Anything you want to plug, just plug everything that you do so people can follow and get updates on this upcoming game and the updates for Archvale.
Yeah, my YouTube channel, I'll probably be doing devlogs again, which is just iDoz, and my Twitter is just _iDoz. So yeah, those are the two places I'll probably post stuff. Yeah, that's it.
Awesome.
We really appreciate you coming, Jamie. This was an awesome interview. It's great hearing the backstory about kind of how this stuff comes about, and your game is awesome. We like to hear the experiences you guys had. So, do you guys have anything else?
No, I'm always glad to learn that a game I like was made by someone who has very similar taste in games to me. I want to be the guy, 3D
nice.
Platformers, shoot 'em ups. It's just good stuff.
Steve's like Ratchet and Clank. I saw his ears perk up.
Yeah, I just love talking to devs. I like to hear the person behind the thing that's so awesome, and just like how it comes together, because this game has so much in it. It's like every time I get a new gun, oh my god, this new gun shoots like this. oh my god, this enemy does this. I'm excited to do the next thing. So it's cool to see and talk to somebody that came up with those awesome ideas. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's been very fun.
Wow, that was an excellent interview. It's one of those interviews where you can just ask a question and he just says something super interesting, and then he can ask another question. Doing the good interviews, I just had a really good time. I love talking to devs and just seeing the person behind the wheel of the bus, as it were. A really bad metaphor. Anyway, what do you guys think?
Yeah, it was a great time. Thanks again. I know we mentioned it on the episode, but thanks again to Jamie for coming on. And very interesting to hear some of the things that folks get stuck on, some of the things folks are really liking, some of the decisions that were made, and just always nice to learn the history of a dev for a game that you really enjoy and learn that they share a lot of your tastes. So I had an absolute blast.
Yeah, that was so much fun. Just hearing that stuff, like you guys said, like just the background and things we don't think about. I mean, I love hearing about how he had to manage his team remotely while he was just developing the game too. Like that's it's just an insane process, especially going through COVID and doing all that. Like it was just a great interview, and honestly, I'm thinking about relinquishing my IQ spot, and JB can just have it. So,
well, hopefully you'll at least come back on and guest for us a couple of times.
Thanks, Steve.
But yeah, please. I know that we've been imploring you the entire episode, but I would say please go check out Archvale. It's available on Steam and it's on Game Pass right now. It came out December of last year, so I know a lot of folks may have missed it just in the holiday rush, but it's a perfect summer game, and
I think it's on Switch
I'd
too.
everyone go look.
Yep, it's on Switch.
Oh snap! And on Switch, so
yeah,
wherever you get your video games, you can play.
That's right. That's right.
So I guess we can do the plug-in because it feels good, like Travis always wants to say. Let's plug ourselves. Where can people find you on the internet? Steve, I'll throw it to you first.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter and on Twitch as BlinkOom. It's OOM at the tail end.
You can find myself, Captain Drachma, at Captain Drachma on Twitter, and always in the Polymedia Discord. Where can they find you, Josh?
On Twitter at Frantic Society, tweeting about getting old, like I always do. Anyway, yeah. I just had such a good time. I really like talking to devs, and I just want to say special thanks and appreciate you getting him on here, Drachma. This was all you're doing. You did all the legwork to get him on here, so we do really appreciate you getting this interview on. I think that having you here helping us out has been a big help, and just getting a dev here, I just love talking to him, so it's cool. Thank you, man.
Yeah, no problem. I'm happy to do it. I love reaching out, shooting shots here and there, so it was fun.
Heck yeah. And if you want to follow us at the show, you can get a hold of us on Twitter at IndieQuestPod. You can email us at IndieQuestPod@gmail.com. We like to hear from you.
Yeah, and also we're on the Polymedia Network, full of tons of fantastic shows. We can just shoot one each here. What show do you want to talk about? I think I want to talk about Polykill because I like Polykill. It's one of my favorite video game podcasts, including this one. I would say this is like a top 3 indie. I almost said indie podcast, video game podcast. So yeah, I just really love Polykill. And Steve's on there. He's sometimes funny. Travis is a little bit more funny sometimes too. We'll see. But I just think it's a great show. They talk about beating video games. Any shows you guys want to shout out?
Yeah, I'll shout. If you enjoyed this very insightful interview with the developer, if you enjoyed learning all sorts of information and just leaving a richer person for having enjoyed this episode of IndieQuest, might I recommend to you the opposite of that, which is Tales of the Lesser Medium, where you will learn nothing and laugh a lot as they explore the story of many different video game series. So if you're looking to have your belly jiggle a little bit, go give that one a listen.
I'll shout out the final two. There's Petey's Power Hour, where you can just talk about booze and basically how it gets into the bottles in the stores that then eventually gets to your glass. And Petey has also some great interviews with some awesome people. So definitely check that out if you're at all into alcohol or even non-alcoholic beverages at times. And then also check out Drunk Friend. So if you want to go and actually listen with your ears, a podcast where they always almost have somebody on, then definitely go and check that out. And they have excellent interviews with a lot of awesome creators and people that were behind video games and things like that. So, and a little birdie also came by my house the other day and told me there's going to be an excellent guest on here in the future. So, a little teaser. I'm not going to say who, but I'm excited for it.
That
awesome.
Sounds interesting to me. It's only now I'm realizing somehow this has gone over my head the entire time. We have Petey's Power Hour and Drunk Friend on the network, but Drunk Friend is not the show about alcohol. It's very strange that the podcast with drunk in the name is not our alcohol podcast, but we do have one.
I never even thought of that.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Also, I mean, if you guys listen to this interview and there's like a small dev that you guys think that you want to hear us talk to, we'll shoot that shot. We'll try it out. We'll see if we can get them on and talk to them. So if there's a game you guys are just super into and you want to know the background about the game, possibly we'll give it a shot and see if we can get them on. So any suggestions are welcome.
Heck yeah.
Definitely.
All right. I think that's it for the show. Thank you guys for listening. You should just go out, check Archvale, get it on your Switch, lay on your couch, kick back, get a giant energy drink like I have, and just have a good time. That's a great, great video game. And I just love talking to devs, and we'll catch you guys next time on IndieQuest.
See you guys.
Peace.